I will start. It is like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all seeds on earth. Yet when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants, with such big branches that the birds can perch in its shade. Hello, my name is ESTHER YOO, and I turned 15 this year. I was born in Cologne, Germany in 2009 as a UBF missionary child. I am currently in my first year of high school. Since birth, I have been raised as a second-generation missionary of Cologne UBF, receiving much love from many people. Although many people couldn't tell whether I was a boy or a girl when I was a baby, everyone at Cologne UBF treated me like a princess. From a young age, I grew up in a spiritual atmosphere, learning the Bible with friends and younger siblings in CBF and participating in children's worship. There were many small events at this conference that brought me joy and different emotions, but now I would like to share two events that particularly touched and deeply moved my heart. The first was the prayer time on Saturday night. But before I talk about the spirit-filled prayer time, I want to mention an accident that happened 4 years and 6 months ago. During the prayer time on Saturday, God gave me a new spiritual insight through this accident I had. In March 2020, I had an accident while horseback riding, where I fell from a galloping horse and broke my right elbow. During the second surgery, due to a medical mistake, almost all 3 nerves in my right arm were burned, resulting in total paralysis of my right arm. When I woke up after surgery, I thought my right arm didn't exist anymore because I couldn't feel or move it at all. Although I used to be a very positive and bright person, the next months of continued paralysis in my right arm led me through the darkest valley of death in my 11 years of life. I even thought about jumping out of the hospital window because it felt much more painful to live in anxiety and such fear of the future than dying where you would only have to suffer for a short moment. However, after moving to another hospital and undergoing a third surgery, I gradually regained some feeling. Exactly 1 year after the medical accident, on Easter Monday, I was able to move 3 fingers for the first time, and I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Yet, 4.5 years later, I still can't move my right wrist and fingers properly, and medically, no further improvement is expected. The doctors have discussed a fourth surgery to try to improve my condition, though they say I will always have to live with significant disability. Still, I had already met God deeply through this medical accident and felt His grace was enough. So I didn't want any more surgeries, because even though I couldn't use one hand, I believed I could still do many things with my other hand, and that I was already happy. With that mindset, the Saturday night prayer time was a moment when the Holy Spirit worked powerfully in my life. It was a time when I saw my relationship with God in a new light and broke down the boundaries I had unknowingly set in my prayers to Him. The reason I went forward was simple. I saw my seat neighbor looking at the people who went forward to pray. And although I normally would have stayed seated, thinking it would be awkward to have a new stranger pray for me, I mean, how awkward would it be if someone makes the effort to pray for me, only to pray for something I don't even agree with? But this time I felt a strong urge that we should go forward together. I didn't expect much, and after my seat neighbor found someone to pray with, I felt out of place and thought about going back to my seat. Suddenly, I heard someone call Esther. Confused, I turned around and saw a familiar face. It was Lydia Kim, who is currently serving in Finland. We exchanged joyful greetings as we have both seen each other not in a long time, but when we started praying, her words hit me hard and unexpectedly, causing a flood of tears, which even surprised me. She prayed for my arm, but unlike what I expected, she prayed, Lord, Esther needs her arm. She has 2 little sisters who need her big sister Esther. Her parents also need her support, and they will need it even more in the future. Esther has many friends and people she wants to help, and she needs both of her arms for that. So if it's in your plan, please heal Esther's arm. Up until then, I had always thought that I could be happy without my arm and didn't need it anymore. Why hold on to hopes that might be disappointed when I could live content without unnecessary disappointments in God? But this wasn't about whether I could be happy without my arm. It was about what God had planned for me and the task He had given me. Lydia's words made me realize several things about myself. One was that my understanding of a good relationship was quite distorted, because I preferred to keep my relationship with God as it was, rather than risk being hurt by God just because I had to have childish hopes, which would have unnecessarily complicated our relationship. I didn't trust that others, including God, could understand my situation or would be able to communicate with me. So to avoid all of this, I answered instead of God, assuming he would see me as ungrateful if I asked for my arm back. I mean, since I had already said I could be happy without it. But Lydia's words hit the nail on the head. During all that time, I had grown tired of being the helpless sheep on the sideline without being able to do anything. Because, to be honest, I wanted to be the one to do my sister's hair instead of them always doing mine. I wanted to play the piano without needing my sister Yeri to play the second hand for me. I wanted to help my friends without them excusing themselves to ask somebody else after my clumsy attempts. I wanted to be more of a help, and I wanted to be more independent without everyone's focus on my own. There were so many moments when I desperately wanted to help others, but because of this arm, I had to let them down. Honestly, my arm did matter to me, and I needed it a lot. And it was okay to bring this concern to God because it was about communicating with him, not whether he would allow it or not. Whether healing my arm is part of God's plan for me or not, I understood that I could bring this request to God and have hope. After all this time, I finally realized that my arm wasn't important just to please others, but it was important so that I could give others what I wanted to give them. Not only friends my age, but also younger JBF friends went to the front and prayed with tears, and some even confessed that they had met God personally for the first time. One of my friends, who had been distant from God for a long time, even told me after the ESBC that she wanted to start Bible study again, which made me truly happy and grateful. Another significant event happened in the evening when we watched a video about the history of the UBF. I've already mentioned that I was born into the UBF. That's why this community has always been a valuable part of me, connected with many precious memories. And I think that's exactly why UBF always felt like something I took for granted. But over time, I realized that such valuable things started to become monotonous for me and lost their value. The video I watched that evening filled me with excitement as I learned about the beginning of the UBF and heard how hard the first female missionaries had fought. During an evening walk with my father, I shared my enthusiasm with him and asked him for even more stories from the UBF's past. I listened with eager ears, not even realizing how far we were walking. He told me not only about himself, but also about all the other missionaries and UBF members with all their passion and vision, how hard everyone had worked, and how faithful, devoted, and competent they all were. I listened in awe, barely able to believe that all of these people in UBF, whom I only knew as the mother, father, grandma, or grandpa of so-and-so, whom I greeted every Sunday, had such different sides to their lives and personalities. And as I listened, a wave of shame and disappointment about myself washed over me. While missionaries in their 20s had decided to turn their lives around, so motivated to tell people in Germany about the salvation of Jesus, to lead them to the path of truth and life, I had sitting here for 15 years, finding it sometimes annoying to wake up early on Sundays for church, only learning now how and why my parents and all the others had even come to the UBF. It had all seemed so obvious it always had seemed so obvious to me that I had never looked or dug deeper to uncover these valuable stories, these treasures that I had simply missed over the years. This excavation of stories gave me a new level of pride and admiration for the UBF I was lucky enough to be born into, and awakened in me the desire to continue the work and passion of the previous generations. I am so grateful to God that He gave me this conference and has guided and preserved UBF from the 10 nurses who came to Germany to now a church with people of diverse talents and gifts. I haven't done anything earth-shattering yet, nor have I started daily early morning prayers. But all these impressions have planted a seed in me, making me think about the children, teens, adults, and even the wiser adults, and what I could contribute there myself. And who knows, maybe these seeds are mustard seeds that have already been sown in many others. A few years ago, I began the habit of finding things to be grateful for each day and writing my thoughts in a notebook before going to sleep. And before realizing, my view of life changed in an optimistic way. I always remembered myself as a very pessimistic and overly worried, anxious person, but now the people always tell me how optimistic and relaxed I seem. It's funny even for myself, because not just the way I act changed, but also my thoughts. I always tended to hyperventilate about the smallest things and lost my sleep overthinking about the worst case scenarios which could happen. But now, I often sit there at nighttime, crying and laughing about my monologues from the outside, but dialogues with God from the inside. Even when I couldn't find answers, pouring out my problems to God, He would lead to a resolution in the final pages, where God would give me the answers, and my heart would overflow with gratitude. Reading through the notes I had written in the past allowed me to remember how God had guided me every day, how God had guided my everyday life and my 15 years so far, not in a boring way, but often in exciting and sometimes thrilling ways, which could be the plot for a best-selling novel. I'm so excited for the story God has written for the UBF. I'm really relieved to know that I'm not walking this path alone, but with all the other people in the UBF community together. I hope for a bright future in the UBF, a future where we are a community, overflowing with people young and old, filled with the love and light from God, everybody looking at Jesus. One word, it is like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all seeds on earth. Yet when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all garden plants.